WWE continues to get weirder and weirder. WandaVision hits Disney Plus. AEW's champion pins Impact's champion. And New Japan Pro Wrestling continues to have a lot of crap talking going on. This is the Rantin Review Podcast. Sexy bitches, welcome back to the Rantin Review Podcast. Before we get to anything else, we got to give some shout outs here to the patrons. A bunch of you guys have signed up lately, so brand new patrons. Alan Banky, thank you for signing up. Ernest, NKLS, Chris Houston, I think. Got a nice Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on his. Harlan Hardway, who's been commenting a lot, welcome. Chris Manley, Sean Tucker, Michael Bolligar, Alan Johnstone, Sean Taylor, and Paul O'Keefe. Thank you all for participating in the Patreon. If you guys want to sign up for the Patreon, there are multiple tiers, one as low as $1 for a shout out and some extra content. We've got the Young Lion $3 tier, which gives you some exclusive extra Q&A and podcast episodes. And of course, the $5 old school watch along where we watch some old school shows. I recorded one the other day. A very curious choice for the watch along this month. But you guys on Patreon will be able to see that. If you want to check it out, of course, you can go to patreon.com/Rasslin with 3 S's, RASSSLIN, RANTIN, and sign up there. Once again, thank you guys out there, all the patrons on my Patreon, for helping out the channel, helping support the channel as we continue to grow. Of course, the network is expanding. This past week, I have done a lot of new stuff. So there's the Wrestling with Finance videos that are going up, which may be moving to its own channel because of YouTube algorithm and search parameters or whatever, but that may be moving to its own channel. We are going to be doing 2 more videos on it. A lot of you guys have asked some questions, so I will be trying to answer some of your questions in the upcoming Wrestling with Finance videos. We also have started our entertainment videos as well. And we'll be continuing some of that in this podcast too, as we do a brief little review before my YouTube review of WandaVision episodes 1 and 2. But a lot of you guys listen to this podcast to hear about wrestling, so we're going to talk a little bit about wrestling here, and we're going to start off with WWE that has gotten a lot weirder and weirder. So I actually watched Monday Night Raw this week. Well, I watched the Hulu version of Monday Night Raw. Half the show is still the same stuff for me. It's half of the show is meh, and the other half of the show it's like, that's pretty cool. Let's start with the cool stuff. The cool stuff that I liked, I absolutely enjoyed this whole thing with the Hurt Business and Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander having his little internal beef. They really played it up in a 6-man tag match they had against Lucha House Party and Matt Riddle. Bruh. That the promo before of Matt Riddle getting his foot stomped on by Bobby Lashley was a little silly. I didn't care for that stuff. I mean, it was, again, they still have this problem with these very stiff backstage skits and stuff. The same thing with Lacey Evans and Ric Flair, which is very stiff. All of it's so very obviously scripted. And the thing about people make excuses for this all the time, but you don't script something so it appears to be scripted, and people go, well, obviously it's scripted. That's what it's supposed to be. No, when you script something, the idea is that you're supposed to perform it so it feels like it's something natural. So it actually feels like real life, not like I'm watching people who are reciting lines. There are a few people who are good at doing that. Randy Orton is one. Randy Orton's very good in the promo he had at the beginning of the show. However, it went on forever. That was a long promo from Randy Orton. I liked the first 3 minutes of it, and then about the 8-minute mark, I was like, man, this thing's still going on? So a lot of hype towards the Royal Rumble. But back to the Hurt Business stuff. It's very reminiscent, a little bit of old school history for some of you guys out there who may not remember this or know this. In 1988, back in the Crockett era, the Crockett territory, pre-WCW territory, there was a faction known as the Varsity Club, and it was headed up by Kevin Sullivan, who was much in the MVP spot, had a big bruiser in it, Dr. Death Steve Williams, who's in the Bobby Lashley spot, and you had Mike Rotundo, who's kind of like being played by Shelton Benjamin in this iteration, and Rick Steiner, who's being played by Cedric Alexander in this iteration. Again, this is an old school storyline, which is, I always appreciate, just done in a new way. And at that time, it was Rotundo constantly getting on Rick Steiner and calling and being down on him. Kevin Sullivan kind of contributed to it. Everybody else in the Varsity Club kind of got on Rick Steiner, and then Steiner eventually broke away and took the TV championship from Mike Rotundo, who had held the title for about a year. By the way, Mike Rotundo, for those of you who do not know, I think he's I can't remember. He's the father. He is the father of Bray Wyatt, and Barry Windham is the cousin stuff. I can't remember. They're all related, but Mike Rotundo is the father of Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt. So this Hurt Business thing is very reminiscent of that old feud for the Varsity Club back in '88, and it's been done in multiple organizations and multiple factions over multiple decades. But again, it's one of those simple storylines that always works. You got the guy that's at the lower rung of the totem pole is getting kind of bullied. Got a little bit of a conflict with one guy in particular, and the rest of the group is kind of like, yeah, you need to get in line, because they value Shelton a little bit more than they value Cedric Alexander. So you got that going on along with the Bobby Lashley Matt Riddle feud, which is far less interesting. But at least, I've heard reports that people are saying that Matt Riddle's getting buried. I can't really say that I saw that in this show. I didn't see last week's show. It looks like they're just doing typical WWE booking with him. Like, okay, he's challenging this guy and blah, 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 blah. But, it's the way they've always done stuff. The Flair, Lacey Evans, Charlotte thing, it has potential to be interesting. What I saw from Monday didn't really interest me. I didn't see the swerve the week before. So I'm going to have to give it some time to kind of get my thoughts on what I really think about that whole thing. The Alexa Bliss, Asuka. First there was the what's she called? The Alexa's Playground, where apparently the ghost of the Fiend is sitting in a swing and then on a rocking chair, and Asuka. Now the weird thing about her doing this against Asuka is kind of the same kind of character. This kind of crazy woman. She's there in all of her crazy stuff with her bleeding eye makeup. She's crazy too, and Alexa's crazy, so I expected a little bit more strength to be shown from Asuka, but Asuka's so weird. Asuka's my bae. I love Asuka to death. If she ever hears this and she likes chocolate, by all means, I would absolutely love to spend at least one dinner with Asuka. It would be awesome. But all my my crush on Asuka aside, it's weird that she's half of the women's tag team champion. She's Raw Women's Champion, multiple time Raw Women's Champion, but she always comes across the way they quote unquote book the show. She's always comes across weak, and she came across as the weaker person here against Alexa Bliss. The match they had later, she lost the match, non-title match, to Alexa Bliss, which basically it makes her look like a very weak champion, and she's been even though she's had the belts, she's looked like a weak champion for the last year, or that it's been about that she's had the title runs. She had some strength against Bayley and Sasha last year, but she generally is booked to look weak and like this crazy person. And, that's a Vince thing. But at least she's doing something. There's a lot of people in WWE who aren't doing anything, so I guess that's one positive out of it. But it just seemed a little jarring to see Asuka, who is, legitimately dangerous and crazy, and we've seen her, come up as in NXT as that dangerous person when she was in Shimmer and all the other places as this very dangerous competitor, and now she's just kind of, this goofy, crazy Japanese girl, which is basically her gimmick right now. I don't know. I thought it was okay. I am intrigued by the way Alexa seems to be channeling the Fiend. Now, as far as, fiction is concerned, it's a cool story. As far as pro wrestling is concerned, it's a little bit too far out there, and I have seen other people say it's too far out there for them. I personally enjoy stuff like that, but again, I can kind of suspend my disbelief a little bit and kind of look at WWE. When I look at WWE as not wrestling, but more as just this kind of variety show, I tend to be able to swallow what they're pouring a little bit more. But if I look at it, from a pro wrestling perspective, I definitely cannot watch WWE after I watch other wrestling companies, because it then just it's too jarring. But yeah, it was all right. The Miz and Morrison show, where they got a Gilbert and this guy as dressed as Drew McIntyre. The Drew McIntyre guy was pretty funny. He kept flipping his wig off. He did a little bit too much. The first time he did it was funny. Samoa Joe had a good line. He's like, "That's a clay less," and that was pretty good. That was pretty funny stuff. But it does, I mean, they did it because Drew's, he caught COVID, so he's on the quarantine right now, and they had to do something with the segment, but it does kind of undermine it a little bit. Hopefully next week, when you got Drew and Goldberg face to face, it'll bring back the seriousness of your main event match for your brand. AJ Styles and Ricochet had an okay TV match with an amazing finish, though. Ricochet was going for it looked like he was going for AJ's phenomenal forearm. AJ caught him, lifted him back up, and placed him into what looked like he was going to do a slingshot suplex. Instead, he just bounced Ricochet off the top, who bounced right into the Styles Clash. That was amazing. AJ and Ricochet, like I said, it's never the talent in WWE. They have guys that can do talented crap in that wrestling ring. They just rarely ever let them do it. And this was an okay match with a phenomenal finish, pun intended. I dug it. I would like to see these guys in a big spot on a big major pay-per-view and have a full, complete match, not a TV match, storyline match. But that was cool. The WrestleMania report stuff that they're doing, where they announced where WrestleMania is going to be at for the next couple of years, I didn't notice that after this year, it's no longer going to be a 2-day thing. It's so interesting, the parallels with Wrestle Kingdom, because last year and this year, Wrestle Kingdom was 2 days. Last year and this year, WrestleMania is 2 days. And I think next year, Wrestle Kingdom is going to go back to being 1 day, and WrestleMania is going back to being 1 day. So it's a weird time for wrestling. It's weird, those kind of parallels there. But the old WrestleMania Info Center, that skit was Stephanie and Triple H, where they were hamming it up big time. We saw John Cena. John Cena showed up out of nowhere, and finally, I hadn't seen him since the whole WrestleMania last year, when he got squashed by the Fiend, and that very weird cinematic that they did last year. But John Cena, apparently, he will be back in WrestleMania, so we have not seen the last of the most overprivileged, overrated wrestler in WWE history. Cena will be back. Roman Reigns wasn't feeling the whole gimmick, though. He's like, there ain't no weatherman here. Paul Heyman all wanted to be in it, and Roman's like, nah, Paul, just give it to him straight. And Paul's like, all right, fine. I dug that. I like the callback to the old info, the control room broadcast pay-per-view previews shows that they used to do back in the old days. It was fun. I mean, they're having fun with it. And that's kind of the thing with WWE. It's like, again, I'm glad I watched the Hulu 90-minute, which I even fast forwarded through some of that, but I'm glad I watched the Hulu 90-minute replay instead of the 3-hour one on Monday. If I watched the 3-hour one, I probably would not be as okay with the show as I was. So WWE is still weird. What's even weirder is some of its old big men clashing. You got Mark Henry and Ryback, slamming into each other on like literally talking a lot of crap about each other on social media. Ryback making a comment that before the WrestleMania match that Mark Henry that was asleep in gorilla position, and somebody told him good luck with that fat POS. And Mark Henry said on I think it was Busted Open Radio, he had said that legitimately, if Ryback hits him, he had to make sure he did this legally. If Ryback hits him, Ryback's going to the hospital, and he'll make sure of it. And so these two guys, if you are ever anywhere and you see Ryback and Mark Henry in the same space, I would run, because you do not want to be anywhere near these two giant, big, huge, legitimately strong, tough guys going at it. Although I hope this is all work for a match at WrestleMania. I wouldn't mind seeing these guys go at it for 5 minutes and just do a big old power wrestling match a la Goldberg and Brock Lesnar from a couple years ago. They can do that. They can do that. I wouldn't mind seeing that. Again, it'd have to be 5 minutes, but I wouldn't mind seeing those two guys square off again and do it right. I don't think so, though. I think this is probably more shoot than work. Over in the AEW, and I guess we have to lump in Impact, they had their pay-per-view. Basically, long story short, Kenny Omega did wind up getting the win at the end of the show. He did wind up pinning the Impact Heavyweight Champion, and now, as much as as much as I really respect the talent and Impact, they still, it's just me. It's just something with me. I still cannot get into their stuff. I don't know why it is. But there's a lot of conjecture that there's going to be some ramifications on that on tonight's Tuesday Impact show, which I am already not going to be watching, but I will try to watch the highlights of it. It's good for Impact, though. It is getting more eyeballs on Impact. I have seen that their numbers have gone up a little bit. I'm far more interested in what's going on AEW as far as the Young Bucks, who got kind of crapped on and tricked by Don Callis and Kenny Omega, that we were going to get the Elite back, and it wound up being Gallows and Anderson. So I'm sure they have a plan on how this is all going to work out. Right now, it's all kind of messy. It's kind of all over the place, but it's different. It's new. It's fresh, and it definitely puts Omega and Callis and the Gallows and Anderson in this very kind of NWO-ish kind of angle, but not. They're trying very hard not to make it like that. Although there's a lot of similarities with, the original NWO, where it was three guys, a world champion and the tag team backup. Same thing here. Not the angle I thought Kenny Omega would take. But so far, so good. He's doing a really good job of it. So we'll see where that goes. They still got Moxley and everything else. We'll see Wednesday night on Dynamite how that all pans out. Over in New Japan, oh boy, there's a lot of crap talking going on over in New Japan. I'm going to be doing a whole video on YouTube about it, so definitely check out my YouTube channel. But we're heading into the New Beginning shows at the end of the month and the beginning of February. Still no word on the Jay White thing. That's still up in the air, whether that's a shoot or a work. People are reporting stuff. I wouldn't listen to anything anybody's telling you right now because nobody knows. But there's a lot of crap talking going on in New Japan. Not just with people in New Japan, but with people who used to be in New Japan. So in New Japan, Shingo Takagi is pretty much continuing to call out Tanahashi and calling Tanahashi soft, essentially. They had a tag team match on the Road 2 show, and Tanahashi's like crying and stuff, and Shingo's like, dude, you're not even taking, I don't think you're fit for the never openweight division. You're not tough enough for us. I'm not going to give it 50%. And yeah, we only can have 500 people at the show, but I'm still going to give, 100% to it. Japan, of course, is in a state of emergency as their COVID cases ticked up. I'm surprised they're even having any fans at these New Japan shows, or that anybody's even going. But that's going to be a concern until they get it under control over there, as far as the crowds and attendance at their shows, and whether or not they're still going to be able to do what they've been doing the past 6 months with having 30 to 50% capacity at their shows. Kazuchika Okada's talking crap about Evil, talking about how Evil being kind of, the backstabber's kind of like a spine, which is very true. Naito's kind of playfully teasing Hiromu in their backstage commentary shows, which is pretty cool. But Naito's also calling out the Great Okan. And a lot of questions have been going on about what Tetsuya Naito is going to be doing post losing the titles to Kota Ibushi at Wrestle Kingdom. And it seems like he's biding his time. I guess that's what he said to Tokyo Sports. And, he beat Okan in one of their tag matches. But Okan's got a little, Okan's not going to take that laying down. And Naito's like, you've only beaten young boys. You haven't beaten anybody significant. You come back with all this stuff. You're with Ospreay's group, but you've only beaten young lions. You haven't beaten anybody of significance. You lost to Okada. You lost to Tanahashi. You're going to lose to me, and I'm just going to do this until I decide to strike again. And which all means that Naito is going to be on his way back up to the heavyweight championship at some point in time. So the Big Four picture is still kind of murky right now in New Japan. Kota Ibushi, Tetsuya Naito, and Okada are definitely in it. The Ace, Tanahashi, I haven't considered him to be in the Big Four for about a year or so now, and we don't know where Jay White is legitimately, if he's coming back or not. You got people chomping at the bit to get in there. You got Will Ospreay definitely is probably a number one contender for getting into that Big Four spot. We'll see as the year goes on whether or not he can do that. On to some entertainment news, however. Now, we're going to talk a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of stuff besides the wrestling, as, again, the Rantin review is expanding. I'm reviewing pretty much anything I want to review now. You can, by the way, check out, I am doing live reactions reviews, as in viewing again, to the Death Note anime from 2007, which is a lot of people consider it the best anime of all time. I'm on that list. I have seen it before, but it's been years, so I'm re-watching it again and recording it and doing watch-alongs with the show. A little tough to do those. Again, it's another one of these things where you've seen like there's thousands of people who've done it on YouTube. Yet if I go to upload a video that's done in the same way, YouTube doesn't like it. So I'm going to do it with very obscured video and lowered audio and stuff, so I don't have to worry about the copyright nonsense. But we will be doing watch-alongs, reviews, and reactions to Death Note over the next couple weeks, or a couple months probably, because I think it's 36 or 38 episodes, so I will be doing that. But I did watch WandaVision. Finally got Disney Plus, finally buckled down and got it. I've been watching that and The Mandalorian. The first 2 episodes of WandaVision, weird. It was expected to be weird. It was said that it was going to be weird. They're basically going through the old school television. So they did the 50s and the 60s in these episodes, I think, with a little bit of Bewitched and I Love Lucy, kind of tie it into the those old 50s and 60s sitcoms, which was very much in that Norman Rockwell era, which I actually dug the shows. Great to see Deborah Jo Rupp, famously Kitty from that 70s show, which is, it's going to be fun. I want to know if they're going to do a joke about that when they get into the 70s. That's going to be funny, because I think the 70s, they're basically basing it off the Brady Bunch, but Deborah Jo Rupp is in this series. And I want to know if she's going to... I'm going to be watching for some Easter eggs about that 70s show, her playing Kitty, and her being in the 70s edition of WandaVision. But most of it is them basically portraying legitimate storylines that you would have seen in the 50s and 60s from some of these sitcoms. And they're just going through a regular sitcom with a couple of little weird things to let you know that it's not quite right. I think this show's probably very jarring for younger people, especially millennials and younger, to watch because they didn't grow up watching that stuff. Whereas Gen X and older, even though it was like 20, 30 years before us, we still... TV back then when I was a kid, there was a lot of time to fill. There wasn't as much content as there is now. So Sunday afternoons, Saturday afternoons, early in the morning, you had Nick at Night too. They would show, Mr. Ed and I Love Lucy and Bewitched and all of this kind of stuff on there. So we were familiar with those old school sitcoms and the way they were done. So for me, it wasn't jarring. It was kind of cool to see it. It actually is a decently written sitcom for that era. They got all the tropes in there, but there are weird little things that happen. Like one guy was choking, and then Deborah Jo Rupp's character keeps saying to Wanda, "Stop it, stop it, stop!" Like Wanda's going crazy. The most significant one, the two most significant things, is that in episode 2 they go outside because they keep hearing this noise they started at the beginning of the show. And Wanda and Vision go outside, and there's this guy coming out of the manhole cover with beehive costume and bees surrounding him, and she's like, no, rewinds it back, and then she's pregnant. So, the episode 2 was titled For the Children or something like that. So Wanda is going to have, just like in the comic books, she's just going to create children with Vision. Vision is, again, quote unquote dead or deactivated or destroyed or whatever. But this is all in her head. And you keep getting these little notes from Randall Park, who's, if you remember him, he was the dad on Fresh Off the Boat. He was in Ant-Man 2 as the FBI agent. You can hear him every once in a while on the show going, Wanda, who's doing this to you? Wanda, who's doing this to you? As like the real world is trying to break into this fantasy world that Wanda is living in her head. We still don't know quite how that's happening. There is somebody watching the actual episodes Wanda is imagining in her head on a TV screen, probably somebody with sword. We've seen the sword logo. There's a ton of Easter eggs in this thing, and I'm going to do a video getting into a lot of them on the YouTube channel again. So definitely look out for. It'll be coming out this week. My WandaVision Easter egg review for episodes 1 and 2. There's a lot of stuff they hid in those shows. It's all over the place, but I liked it. I know it's probably not for everybody, and they may have thought. I know they're releasing them every week. I think it probably would have been better if they had released all the episodes at once. So people who are a little bit thrown off by these first 2 episodes being legitimately 50s and 60s sitcoms with a little bit of something else sprinkled into them, but it's basically played as if it was actually a sitcom in the 50s and the 60s. It's going to turn off a lot of people. Hopefully it doesn't turn off people from watching it. I think Marvel, they're spending a little bit of the credit of their cash for having the credibility that they have, that they can get away with this because they know that their fans are going to probably keep watching. So, I don't know. I'll see how it plays out. I haven't done a Mandalorian review yet. I've only watched 3 episodes of season 1, so I don't know if I'll ever get around to doing that. But so far I like the Mandalorian, so I'm catching up on all the Disney Plus stuff. It's going to be a whole year full of Marvel stuff, so I definitely will be reviewing that on the YouTube channel as well and talking about it a little bit here on the podcast. But that's pretty much it for this week's podcast. Not a lot going on. There's some, a lot of people are really focused on politics right now. I'm trying to stay away from as much of that as possible because I really don't. I'm exhausted with politics. I'm exhausted. Yeah, I'm not even getting into it. So please be safe out there, especially if you guys are getting out in the streets involved with that stuff, protesting or whatever. Just try to keep it civil, guys. Just, I don't care what side, the left or the right you're on. Just enough. We've had enough of it for the last 3 or 4 years. Can we? I think most of the sane people in the world are tired of this nonsense. We're tired of people burning things and rioting and looting and attacking people and all this violence and craziness. But I'm going to get off the soapbox right now and say thank you guys for checking out. Again, you can always check me out on Facebook, Twitter, share this podcast anywhere you guys want to share this podcast. I have a brand new redesigned website, webchannel24.com. Definitely check out the new website, webchannel24.com. We're going to be expanding that. It's just basically redesigned and to be a lot easier. There's a lot of stuff coming up for the rest of this year with that website, so definitely check it out. I appreciate you guys all for watching and listening to this podcast, and I will see you guys for more here on the Rantin Review podcast. Have a good day.